So you didn't get closure. Now what? Not getting closure is like watching a movie with no ending. It leaves us very confused. It leaves us second guessing ourselves, our ideas, our thoughts on what we thought was. And in some cases, I think it can lead to a lot of unhealthy behavior. We're looking for an answer that we think that we need, that we think we want. But unfortunately, we're never going to get it. Why does this happen to us? And this doesn't just happen in relationships either. This happens with friends. This happens with family members. This even happens with people who are no longer here with us. So, how can we cope without receiving this closure? I think it's important that we break it down into three main categories. The first one is no closure in a romantic relationship. This one always goes south. It's messy. When someone gets broken up with no answer, the effects are really crushing. There's no explanation, there's no apology, there's no acknowledgement of what went wrong, why it went wrong, why someone felt maybe unhappy or unfulfilled. None of that is there. Usually, when we know that, it still hurts, but it's easier to rationalize and process the breakup. When we don't have those answers, I think we can really lose our sense of self. And we start to really question and doubt everything. We start to wonder, were we enough? We start to wonder what we did that was so wrong that the relationship had to end like this. We're trying to replay memories in our head and trying to find the answer or the clue of what happened, but it's so hard to figure out because this person that we did love, we had a sense of who we thought they were, and now they're not. Now they've totally shattered that idea. And then the patterns start, right? Accounts start getting checked on social media. People start getting stalked by their ex for a long time. And I think that's normal behavior, honestly, after a breakup, especially nowadays with social media. I think this is definitely one of the most ambiguous losses of these three topics. The second main point I want to bring up is when there's no closure in a friendship, which I feel like is not talked about enough. Because for some reason, society minimizes the loss of a friendship compared to a romantic partner or a relationship. When we go through something like this, we may feel kind of uncertain on how to feel. Because it's like, we try and play it down a little bit. Like, oh, they were just a friend. But I don't think we should be doing that. I think it's totally normal to be bothered by this, especially if it was a friend you had for a long time. This one hurts differently, though, because there's no definitive ending. Even with the romantic side, there is a breakup announcement, there's some form of conversation. It's abrupt. It still leaves you clueless, but at least they're giving you a heads up that they're not in the relationship anymore. With a friend, it's a gradual, slow decline, and eventually they just fade into the past of what once was. We try and cling on to the hope, I think, of a future reconciliation, and we try to hold on to that idea thinking it'll come, and sometimes it does. Sometimes friends do reconcile down the line. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it seems improbable in the moment. The last point I want to bring up is when there's no closure because the person's no longer with us. This one is uniquely difficult. I think we can compare and contrast no closure with friendships or relationships all day long. But how do we rationalize this? When someone that we cared about, loved, considered a close friend, family member, they're not here anymore. It's a tough thing to wrestle with. The simplified answer is that we can't rationalize it because we don't know or have a definitive answer on what happens after this. A lot of our ideas are very faith-based on this. Because of that, we get really frozen in time, in a way, by the what-ifs and the if-onlys on top of already going through the 5 stages of grief. We feel super guilty. We tell ourselves things like we should have done more. We should have made a more conscious effort to spend time with this person. Through these forms of grief, it becomes less about the deceased and more about ourselves, which I think raises the question and sort of redefines what closure means for us. Closure becomes more of an internal construct than an answer that we're looking for from somebody else. Because of that, it leaves us with a lot of heavy emotions that we need to sit and really wrestle with. How do we get through this? First, I think that it's important to allow ourselves to be content with the fact that these questions may not be answered or they're never going to be answered. We have to learn how to be okay with that. Instead of asking ourselves what could have been and trying to rewrite the story in our heads, we have to learn how to adapt with the actual outcome. We have to redefine what closure means for us. And we have to learn how to live with these mixed emotions that we have. Instead of pushing them away, instead of being judgmental on ourselves for feeling this way. Because when these things happen, it's totally human and understandable to feel like this. But thankfully, there are such coping mechanisms that we can use in order to not quote-unquote get over the situation, but again, just to adapt to it and to remind ourselves that we don't know everything. I think another big thing we should do is not remember how the friendship or the relationship, whatever form it was, to not remember it by how it ended. But instead, I think we need to look at it as sort of a learning experience or a time in our lives where we felt joy, where we were able to share memories with somebody else, to be able to feel those emotions, I think is a privilege. And I think it's important to look at our past relationships and friendships that way. Now, what do you do if you are on the other side of the coin and you're the person that left the other with no closure? I have some thoughts on this, and I will leave you with this one final message in this episode. I think that if you left a relationship with no explanation or just slowly stopped talking to a friend without telling them why, I think that you at least owe it to this person to share your side of the story, right? If this was truly someone that you cared about, or if this was someone that you really loved at one point in your life, I think it's kind of unfair to just leave them high and dry like that. They should at least know what went wrong, why you guys got to this point. If it was an acquaintance that you didn't really talk to that much to begin with, and they were just kind of like mutual friends or within proximity of you, and you guys just lost touch, then okay. I don't think you need to share a whole story with that person. It's not really applicable in that situation, in my opinion. But like I said before, if this was someone that you had a connection with, platonically, romantically, they deserve to know. Because you've already hurt them. You have to accept that. Accept that you've already hurt them. Hurting people's hard. We don't like admitting when we hurt someone, right? It's very difficult for us to say that. And it's uncomfortable. That's being human. We make mistakes. But don't leave them asking these questions to themselves. Because, in my opinion, and I'll say it again, they deserve to know.